Begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Kuf Dalid. Begin 8 lines down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues to explain the halacha of a previous Mishnah, which was speaking about if someone steals from his friend. So you say you have to go after him all the way till Madai, and other halachas that apply to the Hashavas Exela. And one of the halachas was a person should not give it not to his son v'loy l'shluchai. And the Gemara goes into a discussion regarding the halacha of Ishliach, and we'll relate back to the halacha of our Mishnah of regarding not sending it through a shliach, because you're going to be liable if you send through a shliach, and therefore don't send it with a shliach, because you're not going to be exempt that way if something happens on the way. Just correspond with Kazakh and the Chesed, turn to Daf Yomi, Pishon turns to today's Daf, should be a chus v'chein when they Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael and throughout the entire world. So discussing today's Daf are ha'goizel v'nishbal ha'sheker. Someone steals and swears falsely, so the halacha is Haida, if he admits Misham Karen B'chemis V'Asham, so he has to pay for the principal, they had a fifth, and the carbon Asham. Lo Haida, if he doesn't admit, so then Mishalim Karen B'Vad, he only pays for the principal itself. Where our daf starts is the machlekes is regarding Shliach Sha'as Be'edim, where machlekes Rabbi and Rav Chizda. Rabbi says Lo have a Shliach, as we'll see exactly what does that mean. Why is it not a Shliach? Rav Chizda says, yeah, if you make a witness in front of make a Shliach in front of witnesses, he's going to be a Shliach. What happens if someone steals from his friend, he swears falsely, and then the person dies? What do you do now with the obligations of the Keren and the Chaimish? So begin the current Daf, Daf Kuf Dalid, 8 lines down at the top of the Yamud. The Mishnah had said, which we were speaking about Hashavas Exela, we said, don't give it to the son of the Nigzal to bring it to him, because if something's going to happen, you're going to have to return to him. It's not hashava until it reaches till his hand. Then it says also, don't give it l'shluchai. So regarding this halacha, says the Gemara Idma, we learned as follows. The Gemara is discussing if, let's say, Reuven has money by Shimon, that Shimon owes him. So then he goes and he appoints a shliach, shasoi be'edim, that he made in front of witnesses, that he should receive the money from Shimon, and Shimon gave the shliach the money. Now Tosfos points out in the V'maskal Shliach, he says, l'chayre, it would seem that we're talking about where he didn't tell him, send it to me through this guy. Just witnesses are testifying that he made him a shliach. Because says Tosfos, if he would tell him, send it to me through that person, obviously that guy would be a shliach, and that would be the end of the conversation. Problem is, Tosfos says later on it doesn't sound like this, because Shmuel says, Maitakante, should have just said that he should send it through a way of saying, Shalach li al de'ezeh, send it to me through this guy, then he would be a shliach. So therefore Tosfos concludes, and he says, what you have to say is, that in all situations where it's shaloi b'fanav, it's not in front of the guy, it's not a shliach until he tells him in front of him, Shalach li al yod, they send it to me through that guy. So the context of this conversation is that he appointed an agent before 2 witnesses to collect the money from Shimon. But he didn't tell Shimon, send it to me specifically through this guy. So now we could understand the context of the machlekes. Rav Chizda says, have a shliach. He's an agent. Meaning, if let's say something beyond the person's control happened on the journey home, the Shimon who gave the money to the shliach is exempt. He already gave it to Reuven's shliach. That would make sense. Rabbi says, lo have a shliach. He says, no, not considered an agent. Meaning you did not accomplish what you needed to do, and you did not give it back to Reuven. So the Gemara explains the machlekes. Rav Chizda says, have a shliach, because lahachi and the Girsa takes out the yod, lachet tarach, vok mebeidim. Why do you think that this Reuven went through the effort of appointing a shliach, an agent through witnesses? Is that the leki birshusei, that it should be considered in this possession of the creditor, that when the shliach gets it, the Shimon fulfilled what he had to do. Rabbi says, no, lo have a shliach. Why? Because what he was saying was like this. All he was saying was, in front of the witnesses, inish mehemnahu. He is a trustworthy person. He's samchit samuch. If you want to rely on him, rely on him. If you want to send it through him, you could send it through him. But that doesn't mean that you took care of your obligation of sending it to me, and therefore if the shlich lose the money, Shimon is liable to pay. So essentially the machlekes is if something happens on the way with the agent, did Shimon fulfill his obligation or not? If you hold this a shliach, so then you already gave it to the guy shliach, you're already exempt.
All this was done without Reuven's knowledge.
Reuven made a shliach.
I'm sorry,
Shimon is the guy who says, the guy says, I'm here to take the money for Reuven. But Reuven himself never.
Was owed the money, had knowledge of it, and was masking?
It sounds like the shliach just comes to him and tells him, here, I am here to collect the money for Reuven. And he gives it to the shliach. The question is, how do we qualify this person? Do we qualify him as a shliach of Reuven, so then he'll be exempt? Or do we qualify him not as a shliach, just as a trustworthy person, and until Reuven gets it, he's not going to be pater. So that's the machlekes regarding how you qualify this personality, which Tosfos discusses these types of things, which regarding who is this person, how do we understand them. But upon them, that's the machlekes between Rabba and Rav Chizda. So on that, the Gemara asks on Rav Chizda, Tanan from a Mishnah Bava Metzia. Mishnah says like this: Hashoyles apara. Someone borrows a cow. The shilcha, now the lender sends the cow biad benoi, biad avdoi, biad shlucha, either through his son, his slave, his agent. That's one version. Or biad benoi, biad avdoi, biad shlucha shel shoyl. So either his own son and child and slave, or the borrower's son, child, and slave. Umesa, and it dies on the way. Pater, the borrower is exempt. Why? Because it was never in the possession of the borrower to be liable in Einstein until he tells him from his own mouth to send it with his son, etc., etc. He didn't. The guy sent it through whoever he wanted to send it to. So therefore, the borrower is exempt until it comes to him. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Hi shluchai, this agent of the borrower that the lender sent it with, hechedami, what's the case talking about? As the Gemara explains. If the shliach if the borrower never made this guy a shliach in front of witnesses, meno yadinan, how do we know that he's his shliach? That the Mishnah is calling it shluchai, right? One of the cases was the lender is sending it with the agent of the borrower. If the borrower never made this guy a shliach with witnesses, how do we even know he is his shliach? Obviously, we're talking about where when the lender sent it with the shliach of the borrower, is that because the borrower had made him a shliach from the witnesses. Ukatania, what are we learning? The pater, that the borrower is exempt even though it's his shliach. Ooh, kashal Rav Chizda. That's the one of Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda said that have a shliach, meaning that the moment you give it to the shliach, you're going to be exempt from einzin. Here we see that the lender is liable up until it gets to the borrower's hands. And that's not like Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda said once it gets to his shliach, it's going to transfer the liabilities to that person. Says the Gemara, it's not difficult. Why? Rav Chizda says later on, we're talking about where it's the guy's workers. Hachanami, here also is talking about beschiroi, which is either that he's hired labor, a day labor, a month labor, a year labor, or a shemitah cycle labor. But the kitoi either means to say, like Rashi says, that he gathers him to live with him, just as company, or it actually means likitoi, as is normally used in Shas, that he's his worker who gathers his grain. But be that as it may, here we're talking about that when we call him shluchai, it wasn't because he made him a shliach in front of witnesses. It's just a presumed shliach because he's his worker, and therefore we call him shluchai. But it's not really shluchai. But if he was actually made him a shliach for the witnesses, then Rav Chizda says, well, why do you think he went through the effort to make him a shliach in front of witnesses? The Lekibir Shur said that it should be in his possession. And therefore, that's not a difficulty on Rav Chizda because he would not talk about shluchai b'fnei eidim, but talk about schirei b'lekita. So the Gemara continues to ask on Rav Chizda, it's not from our Mishnah now. Our Mishnah said, L'yitain, when you're doing Hashavas Exela, the Gazlan should not give it loy lebenoi, not to his son, meaning to the son of the victim, veloy l'shluchai, and not to the shliach either of the victim, of the guy who was stolen from, because you're still going to be responsible until it gets to the hand of the nigzel himself. Says to him, wait a second, again, same type of the conversation. when you say it's the nigzel shliach, what are you talking about? If the nigzel never made this guy a shliach in front of witnesses, how do you know it's a shliach that you're saying in the Mishnah? Don't give it to a shliach. How do you know he's a shliach? Elav, obviously, rather the asab eidim he made in front of witnesses, and even so, we see that quote unquote he's not shluchai. You're not going to be exempt by giving it. So you see again, not like Rav Chizda, you see like Rabbah. Says the Gemara, no, this was the source that we had referenced, that we said that the previous question has the same answer. Tigam Rav Chizda interpreted b'schira b'lekitai. We're talking about the nigzel's workers, and therefore it's not a shliach. But had it been in front of witnesses, then it would be. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Is that so? What are you telling me? That if he had made the shliach with witnesses, then hachanamid shliach, that then he would be quote unquote a shliach, and you'd be pater. So then ask the Gemara, the Tani, safe instead of the safe of the Mishnah saying. Meaning we said what's not going to be good enough is to give it to the shliach. But the Mishnah continues to say, our Mishnah on the previous daf says, what you could do is, you could send it, you could give it to the shliach of the bezdin, and that will take care of your responsibility, your liability. Says the Gemara, but according to Rav Chizda, lifli b'lisni b'didei. This is a classic Talmudic question, that instead of saying a new case, switching from the guy shliach, to say, I'll tell you what will be sufficient, the shliach bezdin, you could differentiate in the case of shluchah itself. As the Bach adds on the words over here, it should really say, when we say this, that it's not sufficient by giving it to his shliach, his b'shlich shaloi asa b'edim, in Ois Aleph, is if it's an agent that wasn't made with witnesses. That's what we're saying. It's not a full-fledged shluach, you didn't fulfill the obligation. But, avol, shliach sha'asa b'edim, but if it's an agent that was made with witnesses, hachanamid shliach, because that's what Rav Chizda holds. So why are you going on to another case of shliach bezin? Somebody said, no. Good question, but like psychically, it's not a clear cut, the differentiation, and therefore we like things that are clear and that are absolute. As the Gemara explains. Shliach bezdin, the agent of the court, doesn't make a difference who makes him the agent of the court, whether it be the victim, whether it be the perpetrator. Either way, have a shlich. He'll be the agent to go ahead and receive it and say, you did what you had to do. So psychically, that's clear cut. So therefore we pick that. Because in contrast, shliach sha'asa be'edim, regarding an agent that was made with witnesses, the chiyasai nigzel hudav shliach. If it's the victim who makes him the shliach, that's a shliach. Asa gazan will have a shliach. But if the gazan says, hey, you be the shliach for this nigzel, that's not valid. So psychically, therefore it's not so clear cut, and therefore we didn't pick it. But you're right, that also is an option. But since it's not absolute, therefore we didn't say it. Now, the Gemara goes to the Mishnah that we said that regarding a shliach bezdin, as we said, that's why we picked that case, and not like Rav Chizda to say shliach sha'asa b'edim, is to tell you that even if a gazlan made it and not the nigzel, it's still a valid shlichus. Through the shliach bezdin. So that's valid, whether the victim tells bezdin to make a shliach or whether the gazlan. Either way is going to work, and it's already going to be in the responsibility of the victim once he gives it to the shliach bezdin. Says the Gemara just points out on that idea. Our Mishnah that we're saying is highlighting this idea of the psikale, of the clear cut that the shliach bezdin is always going to work, whether it's the gazlan or the nigzel, is not like the following Tanya that we learned in the following brayso. Shimon Laza Yomei says that shliach bezdin, which the sounds like that from the Mishnah, that when you give it to him, our Mishnah said the gazlan is going to be exempt. Says Rabbi Shimon Laza, is only sha'asai nigzel, only if the victim makes the shliach bezdin the shliach, below yasai gazlan, and but if it didn't, it's if the victim made it below yasai gazlan, but the gazlan did not make it. I saw gazlan, or let's say the gazlan made it, but v'shalach Allah, the guy sent it, v'not leshalem yadai, and the victim took it from the shliach. So in those two cases, pater, then the gazlan is going to be exempt from any einsim that happened. But the reason is because the nigzel took it. But if let's say there was an einus from the first shliach, the gazlan would be chayiv. So you see from the second case that if the gazlan makes the shliach and the nigzel did not take it from him yet, the gazlan is going to be chayiv. So you see the B'Shimon Laza does not hold like what we just said in Halacha Mishnah that makes it sound like that you can be pater from the einus maderech even if the gazlan made the shliach bezdin. Now the Gemara continues and says, Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Elazar Dam Tavaya, they both say, like Rav Chizda, that shliach shasoi be'edim have a shliach. If you make a shliach in front of witnesses, he's quote unquote a shliach, and that means to say that he's exempt from or liable, whatever the transition is. But the transition happens, it's like as if the guy himself. You can say what he knew with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that lo yitein l'shluchai, you should not give it to the victim's agent. And if he didn't make it in front of witnesses, how do you know he's his agent? Obviously, it's in front of witnesses, and we see still it's not going to be considered as a transfer of the liability. That they both say, don't explain that it's talking about a shliach that was made with edim. Then how do you know that he's a shliach? It's b'mamtzi lo shliach. It's when he asks from someone else that that he should go ahead and offer himself to the gazlan, the amalei. The victim says to the shliach, Isli zuzi gabi planya. I have money by that guy. He's not sending it. Ischazile, appear in front of him. Tell him, look, if you want to send anything to that guy, send it with me. Because maybe he just didn't find someone to send it with yet. So it's not a shliach shas. Maybe we want to know, how could you call him shluchai? If we don't know, is it with edim? So it must have been said with edim. If it was made with edim, so you see, not like these two opinions, which is the same like Rav Chizda, because you see that it's not going to transfer the liability until it gets to the hand of the nigzel. Says the Gemara, no. We're calling him shluchai, even though he didn't make him a shliach for the witnesses. He just said, look, go tell the gazlan that, I'm heading to that guy if you want to send anything. So calling him shluchai, but he never really made him a shliach, be'edim, and therefore that's why it's not difficult on Rabbi Yechon and Elazar, why the halach is going to be that you're not going to be patur, even though the whole shliach shas be'edim is quote unquote a shliach. Or another approach, which we said before, Yinamik Rav Chizda, like Rav Chizda said, that we call him a shluchai because he's his worker, but he never made him a shliach for the witnesses. But because had he made him for the witnesses, you're right, you would be patur once you give it to the shliach of the nigzel. A related discussion, I'm reviewing Mishmul as we continue in Beis. If let's say the owner of the deposit gave to a shliach simanim, gave him signs, and he wrote him his signature on a letter, and he gave it to him, and he said, "Look, go warn that guy that he should give you the money that he has of mine over there." So on that says the Gemara says, "If you the Mishmul, ein mishalchen mois b'dyekani." We don't send money with simanim, but and even if there are witnesses signed on it, which the first taste over here says, why wouldn't diokni is like a figure. Why wouldn't it help if you signed like a type of like a fish or a mast, which the Gemara tells us clearly in Gittin that they were Amiram that used to sign their names like a fish or whatever this and that. So why wouldn't you send money that's owed to someone b'dyekani? Says Taisus that's only talking about the names of Chachamim that were well known. So everyone knew when he signed the fish who it was, but other people not.
The simanim or the amount or how it's packaged?
No, he's signing. He's writing. Please.
Besides the name, he gave simanim.
No, he's not. He's signing. He's writing. He's making like a marker to show that.
That's it.
Yeah, and he's writing on the letter that he gives him the rights to go ahead and
Just the signature, not in the amount or.
No, he's saying that the money that he has by that guy, he should go collect for him.
With the document, and I'm not sure I understand.
No, it's not a document. That right, emblem.
That what?
To collect the money that this guy owes him.
So it's a star, it's a note?
It's a note, something like a note. Right? I mean, Tais discusses exactly what the case is. If he tells the scribe, write to that person that he should send me the money through that guy, and then he signs b'dyekani shalai with his own emblem, even if there's a witness's sign on it, that it's his emblem, it's not effective.
But what if the witnesses sign that this document is true and valid?
Right. So, but if it was signed on this, that's what Taisa said. But if it was signed that he said to him to send it through him, then he would be a shliach. But it's not. Here it's just that with his emblem, even if this witness is signed, it's not gonna be effective. Rabbi Yochanan says no. If his witness is signing it, then you could send. So that's their machlekes regarding if this is something that we send or not. Now, so Amri, they said l'shmuel maitakanta. According to Shmuel, if you tell me that you can't send someone by just signing, so what's the remedy? And that's what Taisa asked previously. He says, what do you mean what's the remedy? Why don't you just say that send it to me biyad zeh? And that's what Taisa discusses. It's not clear exactly, but the Gemara is asking. So according to Shmuel, how is the guy supposed to get his money? So says the Gemara, I'll tell you how. Ki hadei Reb Abba hava masik zuzi b'Rabbi Yisrael bar Chama. Reb Abba was trying to collect money that he had by Rabbi Yisrael bar Chama. So only Reb Safra. Reb Abba said to Reb Safra, "Bahadi to us look, when you go, I see nihali. Go bring the money back to me." So when Reb Safra went over there, Amalei Rava Brei. So he was trying to collect money from Rabbi Yisrael bar Chama. So his son Rava, Rabbi Yisrael bar Chama's son Rava said, "Mi kasav lach." Who wrote for you? Reb Abba, did he write for you his kabalti that I received my money? Meaning with the receiving of Reb Safra? Meaning when I'm going to give you this money, my father's going to give you whatever to pay back Reb Abba. Did Reb Abba write to you that I received the money like a receipt? So he says no. So he says, if that's the case, Zil Bereisha, first go back, that he should write for you like a note that I received it already. Now, L'Seif, at the end he told him, he says, no, it's not true. Even if he's going to write for you, I received it, Lav Kluma, that's not going to be anything. Why? Because Dilma, the us is, maybe by the time you're going to come back to us, Shachav Reb Abba. Reb Abba, who is already older, maybe he's going to pass away. And then his assets are going to fall in front of his orphans. And Viskabalta Reb Abba Lav Klumhu. Reb Abba is saying, I received it, is not going to be effective anymore because his agency of you is already going to be nullified before they receive it. And
How so?
because he might have died. If he's dead, then he has no ownership of the money.
Then shlichus really can never work because it's not ragil, it's not shaykh, it's sesafir or whatever it's called. Then you can never have a shliach because you can be choshet that the shlichus will always possibly be terminated.
I'm saying here it's specifically because of the money as a Yerusha. Generally, you say mitzvah kem dibra meis, but here it's like it's his saying his gabalti is not going to be effective. So if that's the case,
why don't you hear my question? I don't remember. This is very surprising tomorrow. You're now saying that the shlichus to collect his money to his children is invalid because he might die. Then you can never make a child. Or you're saying there's no shlichus because the guy might die.
No one's saying it's not a shlichus. It's just saying that in this case, that when Rebab is saying his gabalti, he's saying that it's not going to be effective because before the whole point of his gabalti is that when they receive the money from the debtor, it's gonna say that it's whatever the shliach is getting it is like, okay, I received it already. Problem is you can't say his kabalti because he's dead already. It's not meaning the shlichus is not even taking effect. The whole point of the shlichus here is the idea of saying I received the money already. But you can't say this is different. Look at Rashi Div Masla Shachav Rababa. It says the zakanu ukfar batu shlichus kaid mishadekabam. His agency is going to be nullified before they receive it. Now, if an ayin is going to happen on the way, the orphans are going to claim the money because your hiskabalti never even took effect. A regular shlichus, you could make a shlichus before you did, but here the shlichus is not taking effect yet until the guy gets the money. If by the time you're on your way back, Rababa dies, so then his hiskabalti has nowhere to take effect on, because it's only once the shlich receives the money can it take effect. So Amalei says, okay, but so what should we do? What's the remedy? So they said, Zil nikninu loch agav ara. Let him go and acquire to you the debt through a piece of land, and let it be yours wherever they are. Shigmar Kedushin of Chavav tells us that nechasim she'elam achrayas, which are like, let's say, money, movable items, could be acquired with nechasim she'elam achrayas, which is a piece of land. V'to'ad kosav lon hiskabalti, and then you go right, I received it, because you're going to receive it, and you already have the right, you own the money already, because he was maknet to you through a piece of land. Which the Gemara says, as we find Kildra Papa, like we find Bar Papa, of a Masik Trace Alfi Zuzi Bechazai, he was owed 12,000 zuz in this place Bechazai. A Kaninu Nehatlan, this is the point. He was makni, transferred over the funds to Rav Shmuel Bar Abba, Agav Asiva de Beise, through, either it means through the threshold of his house, which is connected to the ground, and therefore has al halacha like karka, or it means sifa, means the end. The end of the house he transferred to him, which is one corner of the house. As we see, which that's the main idea, that because or else you have situations where you have a shliach, and the person's not going to want to give the money, because this is where it relates back to the sugya of Amad Aleph, where because if any incident happen, then the liability is going to be for the sender, and he doesn't want to. So therefore, that's what he said, so get to his kabalti. Problem is, they say his kabalti, he's already old man, and we're going to run into a problem where he might die beforehand, and it's not going to be effective. So I said, okay, just let him be maknid to right now the funds, and then it'll be yours, and you could just write his kabalti. And the Gemara just finished up that story. Ki asa, when Rav Shmuel Bar Abba came back to Rav Papa, he came out to greet him all the way till Tavach, the name of a place where he was so happy that he brought him his funds. So again, that was this Gemara over here, where the question about if there's Adam sign in it, do we send him or not, regarding if this is going to be effective. But that's what Taisus, let's say at the end of the first Taisus, he says that as long as he doesn't say b'fanav, in front of him, I want you to be my shliach, that you should only send it through him, so he's not a shliach. So the lender is going to be responsible. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says, no, if there's witnesses on it, then we do send. But that's this discussion regarding whose liability is this going to be, the shliach or not. And if we don't consider him a quote unquote shliach, then they were like, hey, we're not sending the money until you write his gabalti, which he was able to do it by him being makneh to him the funds. Now we learned in the Mishnah that nosan lo yasakeren b'chulu. So we learned that if, let's say, he gave him the principal, etc., but he didn't give him the chaimish, so then we said that you don't have to go all the way to Madai, because the main principle was that as long as you gave the keren, so then you fulfilled your primary kapara, and you don't have to go back all the way to Madai. Now, one thing is, from the fact that the Mishnah had to say that even though you owe the chaimish, you don't have to go after him. So says the Gemara, what you do see is that alma chaimish mainhu. Obviously, the fifth is considered as money by the gazlan, and the imayis, and if the gazlan dies, b'shamal yershin. That would mean his inheritors would have to pay it, because if it's not mammon, what he's saying that you don't have to go after him, of course not. We're saying obviously that it is considered as mammon, but it doesn't have the same halacha as the keren, which is the primary kapar. Moreover, we learned in the Mishnah, nosan as a keren, if you gave the principal, and v'nish b'alachaimish, then we said, oh, what happens if then you swear on the fifth? Oh, we say harei meisav chaimish al chaimish. Then you got to add on a fifth on the fifth. Again, alma chumash b'maynu. Obviously, the chaimish by the gazlan is considered as mammon, which is owed to the nigzel, and therefore, if you swear falsely regarding that, well, because now you swore falsely money that you owe to the nigzel, you have to be a fifth on the fifth. So again, two rayas that the chaimish itself is considered as mammon. But Tanan HaMehochi, similar in the Brisa. If someone steals from his friend and he swears falsely and then he admits, umeis, and then he dies, Yershin Mishalman Kermachemish. His own inheritors have to pay the principal and the fifth, which you see that obviously it's considered as mammon that's owed to the nigzel. But a betruma in the ashram, they're exempt in the ashram because the bolov, the guy himself, the gazan died. Because had he separated when he was alive, it would require to go and graze and develop a blemish. And when he didn't separate it, they're exempt because the ashram is kapara, it's not mammon, and there's no kapara for mason. Fine. The problem is, ask the Gemara on this last halacha, how is that really so that inheritors have to pay the fifth of their father? But it seems to be contradicted from the following brisa. There's a brisa where the beginning of this brisa in Teretz Kohanim says in the pasuk, they have to return the person has to return asher gazel that he stole. What does it mean that he stole? On his own robbery, he has to add on the fifth, but not on his father's robbery. That's what the brisa says over there. Continues the brisa. I'm still going to say, when is it that a person does not pay a fifth for his father's gezela? And that's the main point that we're bringing out. And we see that you don't pay. It's just that the brisa entertained to say maybe I would only say the bezman shlei nishba only at a time when there was no swearing loy hu v'loy aviv. Not him, not his father. But hu v'loy aviv, let's say the son himself swore falsely, and not his father. Or or let's say the father swore falsely, not him. Or hu v'aviv, or himself and his father. Minayin, how do you know that even over there in all these cases that you're going to be pater? Tamalem asher gazel, that he stole, basha ashik, and that he oppressed. But hu loy gazel ashik, he didn't steal and he didn't extort. So wait a second. You see that the son is always exempt for the father's chaimish. Didn't you just quote a brisa a second ago that said that the son has to pay the chaimish of the father? So Rav Nachman says like kasha is not difficult. Why? The first brisa is shahida. The father admitted in his lifetime after he swore falsely. So he was already nischayev, he already became obligated in the chaimish. Oh, that's already mammon that the Yershim have to pay. The brisa of the Teretz Kohanim. The second one is shaloi haida, where the father never admitted, which the Gemara assumes right now that no one admitted, not the father, not the son. Says the Gemara, iloi haida. So if no one admitted, so keren namid l'mishalim. So why is the son even paying the principal? It shouldn't have to pay the principal. No one admitted to anything. That you're right, the son doesn't have to pay even for the principal, but you can't say that because from the fact that the brisa says that the son does not have to pay the chaimish, remember the karen mishalim, that obviously would sound like that the son has to pay the principal. But more of a time you learn in the brisa that the son is liable for the father's gezela for the karen, because the brisa says by dain on the I'm still going to say karen obviously you see clearly that the son is liable for the principal of the father's theft. But I would say, when do you say this? Is only if him and his father swore. But let's say the father swore falsely and not him. Or he swore but not his father. Not him, not his father. From where do we know that in all cases you're going to be like the inverse of the chaimish? Chaimish are never going to be liable. Here, how do you know you're always going to be liable for the father's theft, for the principal? It says in the pasuk Gizela, V'oishik, Aveda, Upakadin. It says all these things. Yesh Talmud. There is what to learn from this. So the Gemara says, "But Yosef Rav Huna was saying, we're coming and we're saying about this teaching." So only Rabbi his son said, "What is this last words over here? Yesh Talmud kamamar." There is a learning, is what the master is saying, meaning that the Tana is bringing from a pasuk, from the fact that he brings all these extra words in the pasuk. That's where he's saying that the son is liable to pay. Or Yesh Talmud kamamar. The word Yesh Talmud sounds very similar. Yesh Talmud. Yesh Talmud Kamama, that he should pay, meaning, but it's from Svar that he should pay, and not from Psukim. That was the question. But either way you see, is that the son is going to be liable for Gzelas Aviv. The Amalei responds to him, he says, Yesh Talmud Kamina. Says, I'm saying that there is a source, because the Merbiya de Kroi Amri. It's from the extra words of the Pasuk. So we're back to the question, that if you're telling me that it's talking about that no one admitted, so then you should be exempt on the Karen too. Why are we saying that you're only pater on the chaimish? If you, the way you're describing the case that you're pater on the chaimish is because there was no haidah, so there's no haidah should be pater on the Karen too. So Elrada said to the Gemara, no. My loy haida. What did we mean when we said that he didn't admit? Means loy haida aviv. The father didn't admit, but b'haida b'nai, his son did admit. So if the father swore falsely and he admitted, so then we said then the son has to be even the chaimish, like we said before. We had 3 proofs to show the chaimish is mammon. If the father didn't admit and the son didn't admit, then you're not even paying keren. This case of this price is the father didn't admit, but the son did admit. So as Rashi explains, so he pays the keren, but not the chaimish, because the pasuk excludes the chaimish for the gezel of his father, because it says asher gazal. But for the keren itself, now we have a ribui of where it says gizela, it says pekadin, it says aveda, it says aishik, and therefore we say that he's going to be liable for the keren. Now the Gemara asks, if that's the case, that he's chayiv for the gzela, so v'nechayiv b'noi chaimish, the son should be liable for the chaimish ashvu didei, on his own oath, like Rashi explains, because the Brisa said that one of the cases you're going to be pater on, so we said you're always pater on chaimish. Not only this, not only that. One of the cases was, even if it's him and his father swear, it's going to be pater. But since the son himself swore falsely and he admitted, why is he pater on his own shvuah? I understand you're exempting him on his father's shvuah for the chaimish, but his own shvuah he should be chayiv the chaimish. Somebody said, so there's 2 approaches. One answer says the Gemara b'she'en gezela kayemes. We're talking about that the stolen item no longer existed, where there's no responsibility for the son to pay, because the Mishnah teaches later on of Kafir Alpha Mabeis, Perka Gozla Machal, says if someone steals and feeds the stolen item to his sons, they're going to be pater to pay. So therefore, had the son denied, it's just denial of words, and the oath he's making is not an oath of gizela, because he's not chayiv for the gizela. It's a shavuos bitui. It's just a false oath, which is no chaimish when you make a false oath. It's only a shavuos gizela when there's something that you deny. Here it's not here anymore. Not here. He's not responsible. Says, wait a second. Ibushen gizela kayemis. We're back to the question. If the stolen item is not here, I feel karen namel mishalom. That why are you paying for the principal? Why are you saying he's only exempt from the chaimish? Shouldn't be paid for the principal either. Says, it's necessary. We're talking about with the ikka achrayis and the bacheds on the words, like you see from Rashi's Devar Maskell. There is achrayis nechasim, which again is always code word for karka. Oh, the Gemara tells us later on Paragaz al-Machal, although when the children eat the father's stolen goods, they're pater to pay. But the Mishnah tells us if the father left over achrayis nechasim, if he left over karka, they have to give it back, and they covered avin because of the father's dignity. Oh, so that's why they have to pay for the principal. Says the Gemara. But who cares that this karka? At the end of the day, milva pehi, it's still an oral loan, right? There's no document here written regarding the money that's owed to the nigzel. There is no document. Now, milva peh, an oral loan, cannot be collected not from inheritors and not from consumers. So why is the keren being collected from the Yershim, which the bottom Tosfos points out that the question is being asked according to the one who holds, which is brought in Bava Kama Daf Kofayin Hey, that shibuda, a lien, is not the eraisa. Because from here it sounds like that biblically you're going to be collecting from the Yershim. Now, the brisa that the Gemara brings later on of Kofir Aleph, that if the father left them achrayis nechasim, they have to pay. That's not a difficulty because they're going to explain that that's talking about rabbinically, so that you don't stop people from lending money, like our Papa Paskins about stuff Kofayin Vav Medalf. What the Gemara is asking over here is like, if you hold shibud is lav deraisa, so then why, if it's so then it's just like an oral loan. So then why are you collecting even the keren? So what they said is you continue to have Kofayin and Aleph, b'shamad bedin. We're talking about where there was already hamada bedin, it was already a court case. Oh, if it's a court case, so then it's like it's already written in the document. So if that's the case, so then that's why he's going to have to pay for the Karen. So then the Gemara says, but if there was a court case, so that's mammon also. You have to pay the chaimish also. So Rapun the Rabbi Shloimy says, Lafisha in mishal chaimish. No, because we don't pay a fifth, a kfiras shibud karkois, on the denial of a lien on property. Because as Rashi explains, what does the chaimish come for? Chaimish comes for the shua, the false shua that you made, not for what you stole. Stole is the keren. That's not a shvua, because the Gemara tells in the shvua stuff, you don't make an oath on property. And this son, when he swears, he was denying what? Denying shibit karka. Because if not for the karka, what we call a chrayas nachasim, he wouldn't have the responsibility to pay. So it's a very unique case. We're talking about, like we said, the father had no money, and therefore they don't have to pay the chaimish. So he said, why did I have to give? Meaning, because the shavua that the son made was really nothing. It was a shavua's bitui. But he said, then why paying for the keren? He said, because there's karka. So he said, okay, well, that's just an oral loan. So he said, no, there was already Hamad Badin. So then you are denying something. Well, then why did you pay the chaimish? He says, well, no, because my whole denial of the gzeila, because my whole liability is only regarding karka. It's only because the father left over karka. Because when they consume the gzeila, there's no responsibility to pay for anything. It's only when there's karka that there's shibud nechasim. Then you have to pay with the karka. Oh, that shvua is what's mechayev the chaimish. There's no halach of shvua on karka. So therefore you cannot be mechayev them a chaimish for the son's false oath. That's one approach the Gemara has. One more approach the Gemara says, Rav Amar, he says, the truth is we could even talk about, no, the gzeila stolen is around. And that's why you're obligated to return the principal. Then the question you had was, wait a second, if the stolen is around, the son should be liable chaimish on his own false oath because he admitted to that. We said, yes, I understand the father's false oath you're not chayav for, but the son's own false oath you should be chayav for. Says the Gemara, Hachamai Skin, says Rava, what are we talking about? His diskaya shel aviv. We're talking about where the father's purse, the money where his father had put the stolen money in, was mufkedis b'yad. It was deposited by someone else. And this stolen money was inside over there. Oh, Karen Misham, you're going to pay for the principal, though Isa, because it's around. Chaimish Misham is not going to pay for the fifth. Why? Because the Chiyish Tabei, when the son swore falsely, it's not Bekushtish Tabei, he was swearing the truth. The Holo Habiyada, he did not know. He didn't know because it wasn't around. The father had the money by someone else. And as the Mishnah teaches, you're not chayiv when you're totally erroneous for a shul like over here, because that's what's called libe anse. He was forced by his heart. He thought it wasn't here. He didn't know, and therefore that's why he's going to be patur on the chaimish. Thank you anytime.